This episode, we go far back into Cape Breton history, all the way back to 1713. At that time, 6 years before construction began at Louisbourg, the French had just lost territories in Newfoundland and Acadia, and were busy colonizing Île Royale, now Cape Breton Island. Coming from the Baie de Plaisance, now Placentia in Newfoundland, some of the French cod fishers came here in what is now Richmond County and founded the town of St Esprit, Holy Spirit in French. Located somewhere on the rough coastline of southern Cape Breton's Fleur-de-Lis Trail, at its peak, it was home to 546 residents, a sizable town for the time period. Accessible only by sea in the early 18th century, its short existence leaves little to be found now. In truth, the exact location of the settlement is unknown, due to the changes of shoreline features over the last 300 years. By comparing contemporary maps to today's coastline, and with the help of aerial videography, we can roughly guesstimate the likely location of this vanished village. Explore with me as I search for the lost harbour settlement of St Esprit. Today, St Esprit is situated between Louisbourg, up the coast to the east, and St Peter's, about 30 kilometers to the west. It is loosely centered on St Esprit Lake and is sparsely populated. However, this area would have looked vastly different in 1700, being a wooded area with no roads. Before being settled by Europeans, it was a Mi'kmaq gathering place called Asukaditch, a place for gathering clams. In contrast to how the British would eventually settle Cape Breton, the French were mainly interested in setting up harbour communities on the coasts, exporting mainly dried cod from the coastal communities in a trading triangle that connected their Central American colonies to the south and France to the east. The war with the British for Atlantic Canada and its easy access to the cod stocks suffered for the French in 1713 when they lost territory in Newfoundland and mainland Nova Scotia. The French then invested in settling Île Royale. And so, leaving the shores of present-day Placentia Bay, they landed on the craggy shores of Cape Breton and began setting up new colonies, one of which would have been St Esprit. Under the military protection of Louisbourg, most important in St Esprit was the fishery, conducted out of small sailing vessels capable of running the narrow inlet leading to the settlement. Louisbourg merchant Michel Daccarrette kept part of his fishing fleet at St Esprit. Life there would have been pretty rough. Pardon my French here. As described in La pêche de la Moreau à l'île Royale. Resident fishermen certainly also had to maintain their own storehouses. Erosion by sea, especially during storms of winter, constituted the main cause of damage to storehouses situated near the edge of the water. Without annual repairs, other fish storehouses on Île Royale would have suffered the same fate as those at St Esprit. By 1734, there were 234 residents, and like all French colonies, the Catholic Church would have been the main building and hub of the town. A few short years later, in 1737, the population reached 546, which would have been a notable settlement for the time. It was considered an easy mark for raiding English and New Englanders, and the defenseless community was attacked in 1745 during the First Siege of Louisbourg, probably for target practice, and then razed to the ground. Weren't the British just lovely people during wartime? The community subsisted through the 1750s with a population of 100, according to the French census data. Now, The exact location of the settlement ruins are unknown, but today, with a contemporary map, I'm going to scout a few locations and see what we can see. This map was made by Samuel Holland in the 1760s, who was surveying Cape Breton for settlement by the British. We can see the location marked as ruins on the map. So, the settlement had been long left to rot by 1768. By overlaying this map onto a modern one, we can sort of get an idea around where the town likely stood. From above today, there are no ruins to find. Too much time has passed, and the land has swallowed up anything remaining. Yet, it is not hard to imagine homesteads and the community built on these cleared areas below. There would have been scattered locations with docks around the lake, and a large church built somewhere, surrounded by the bulk of the settlers. This is definitely the place. As much as I want to find something, anything remaining is likely buried a few feet under the earth, similar to how Newtown and the ruins of Louisbourg were. And without knowing the exact location, it would be quite an undertaking to find the original location of the buildings. The inlet, talked about in all the descriptions, no longer flows into the town area, as you can see, but 300 years of Atlantic weather can do that. Speaking of harsh weather, this beach and small island are near the site where the Tilbury foundered during a hurricane. The Tilbury, or Tilbury, a British warship, was wrecked off the coast in a hurricane. Afraid the French would kill them, the survivors were eventually rescued by local Mi'kmaq. It was reported that the chief, upon getting to the wrecked Tilbury, told the nervous survivors that, "If you come in peace, we will help you to shore. If you bring war, you will find it." I decided to check out this little island. Though not surrounded by rocks, it does have a lot of sandbar, making this beach very exciting for waves. If you ever wondered why Cape Breton is full of lighthouses, there are many shipwreck sites to explore, if that's your thing. I suspect this little island, labeled St Esprit Island on Google Maps, was Tilbury Island from Holland's map. Turns out the little flight over to the island was worth it, as I eventually found some ruins to look at. This old lighthouse is clearly not 1700 vintage, but a fun find nonetheless. I must come back in the summer for a visit. The beach is quite beautiful and scenic. Speaking of beaches, if you're interested in Cape Breton's beaches, check out this channel in the link above for a full rundown on all the wonderful beaches Cape Breton has to offer. It's been said that cannons and coins were found along the shoreline for decades after the Tilbury wrecked. If you're wondering, I didn't find any. According to the 1752 census by Sieur de la Roque, St Esprit was composed of some 14 families totaling about 75 persons. He further reports that St Esprit is well settled. It is adapted to the cod fishery, the raising of cattle, and for gardening, the soil being sandy in character. Vessels of 60 or 70 tons can enter and anchor in the middle of the roadstead from 10 to 12 fathoms of water at high tide. There are two reefs, one on the starboard and the other on the larboard. Behind is a barrachois which runs inland for about a league. The settlers cut what hay they require on the banks of this barrachois. All the lands in the neighborhood of St Esprit are covered with fir wood only. The second siege of the garrison at Louisbourg in 1758 was the end for Ile Royale. St Esprit was destroyed again, and the population dispersed. Some residents took to the forest, living with the Mi'kmaq. Some returned to France. Others were captured by the English and were imprisoned or deported. The area never regained its status as a fishing center. As I mentioned earlier, British colonists saw Cape Breton as more than a fishing outpost on the Atlantic. They were more interested in finding available land. Once the Highland clearances started, the region was gradually resettled by the Scottish and other arrivals from the British Empire. In 1881, St Esprit was described as a post-settlement with a population of about 100. Gone was the Catholic Church, giving way to a Presbyterian one. You can imagine for the Scots seeing Cape Breton for the first time and thinking, well, looks like home to us. And that was my trip to St Esprit. Thank you for watching this episode of Abandoned Cape Breton. If you enjoy the work I do, please click that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Where should I go next on this beautiful island known for its stunning landscapes and rich history? Do you know of any abandoned sites you'd like me to visit? Let me know in the comments. Join me next time as we embark on a journey to uncover the mysteries hidden within Abandoned Cape Breton.